Today I'm taking you along for the journey as we add some more trees to our mini orchard. Now we actually have two mini orchards on our property. I have the one behind me and then I have the one that we're adding fruit trees to today. And we're going to be talking about how you can create your own mini orchard regardless of the size property that you have, whether it is a small orchard of just 1 to 3 trees or it's an orchard of 20 or more. We're going to break down the steps of how you can create your own serene area to be able to have fruit and be more self-sustainable. So come along for the journey today. The first step to creating your orchard is knowing the area that you're going to be planting in it. You want to make sure that you're choosing an area in your land that's going to have around 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, have nice drainable soil, and a good airflow to help prevent disease from growing on your fruit trees. Disease can be something really common in fruit trees, and oftentimes you might need to treat or spray for that. So anything that you can do to reduce that is going to be really important when you are picking your location. Now we have an area that gets a lot of sun behind me, and in our new orchard that we're growing out also has a really good abundant amount of sun, so I know that it's perfect for that area. You also, once you do choose your area, think about the actual hardiness of your zone. I live in a 7B zone, so I'm going to choose a tree that's going to be able to get a little bit more hardy. For example, apples do really well in my zone, and pineapple trees, for example, might not do as well. So know your zone and the trees that are going to do the best in that zone. Usually you can just do a quick search on your zip code, the zone that you're in, and then you can choose trees accordingly. And a lot of the websites that you're going to be purchasing trees from will also be able to tell you which zones are best for your area. So keep in mind as you are doing that. Now, some trees do require something called a chill time. Now, chill time is really important to some trees. This means that for a certain period of time, they need it to be below 40 degrees. This can be common in a few different types of trees. I will list them here so that you know, but knowing that your area actually has this period of time that drops below those degrees, you know that these trees will actually thrive in your area. And that is really important when choosing your trees. It's also important to know that the location that you're choosing is going to be able to house all of these trees. Now, different trees are going to need different amounts of space between them, and they're going to grow to different heights. So it's really important that you're choosing an area that's going to be big enough for your trees. If you have a smaller area, then there are a few different things that we can think about when we're thinking about that area. First off, we could choose a dwarf or semi-dwarf tree. These are trees that are not going to grow as high. I have 2 beautiful patio peach trees in our garden. They do not grow nearly as high as a normal peach tree would grow, so it's okay to have them in my garden. You can also have them in a potted area. So maybe you don't have an area that has a lot of land that you could be planting in, but you do have an area where you can have a lot of above ground pots. Something like this might be perfect for you. Whereas a dwarf or semi-dwarf tree might be really great if you're looking to do just a small backyard orchard. Whereas if you do have a lot of space, we have around 10.5 acres here at our homestead, we're able to actually plant some much larger trees. And knowing this, we do still want to account for the space that they need. And measuring the distance before you're planting them is really important, because you might get them and they're really small and you think that they can be a lot closer together. But as they continue to grow, and some trees like pistachio nuts, they actually need a lot of space between them to really thrive, whereas apples can be pretty close together, but it's actually going to help them pollinate and get better fruit production. So there's honestly a lot of things that you can think about when you're creating your orchard. Let's zoom out and actually think about pollinators and non-pollinators. So there are going to be 2 types of trees that you can look at. There's going to be trees that require pollination, and sometimes it is putting 2 of the same trees right next to each other. In apples, sometimes you need different varieties together in order to cross-pollinate within each other. And then you have self-pollinator trees. So some trees can pollinate with themselves and they don't need other trees around around them. As you're doing your search for which trees you want, if you do have a smaller area, then you might want a self-pollinated tree. Now, if you love apples and different varieties, then you might want to have some cross-pollination there. Something you can also think about is there are trees like the crabapple tree that you can plant in an apple orchard, and it most likely is going to pollinate all of the other apple trees. We have a crabapple somewhere back here, and then we have apple trees all in the back that do require some pollination from another tree, and that crabapple is going to be the one to pollinate all of the other apple trees. So it's really important to have that crabapple, otherwise I'm not going to get fruit on all of my other trees. And it can be quite deceiving because you might get a lot of blossoms on a tree, but because I don't have those other pollinators in there to cross-pollinate with it, you're not gonna get a lot of fruit on your trees. So blossoms can be a little deceiving when you do think about pollination. When working with a smaller space, we talked a little bit about how you can optimize your orchard. The first thing is going to be getting smaller trees. So you can get your dwarf or semi-dwarf trees, and those do not grow to the same height as a normal fruit tree, as well as they don't need the same amount of space between them because they're just not as big. So this is really great if you still have a space, you want to grow a few different types of trees, but you just don't want them to be full size. There's also another option, and that is to get a tree that is going to have different types of fruit grafted onto it. This is going to be called a fruit cocktail type tree, and I've seen that there's really two varieties of this. You can either get an apple tree that's going to have multiple different types of apples on it, or you can get a tree that might have a few different types of fruits on it. What's really cool about this is you can have a peach and a nectarine on the same tree because they're basically just taking a tree trunk and then they are grafting different types of trees on it. Although I would definitely be cautious about these types of trees because sometimes you will see that one fruit is just a lot stronger, or one tree just gets really well grafted and the other ones do not thrive as much, and you might have one variety a lot better than some of the others. So it may not work in your favor, especially if you have one type that you really don't like and that one is the most successful. But if you really don't have that large of a space, this can be a really good option for you. Luckily, we do not need to do anything like this. We're able to really have an area that's set out for our orchard, which we are doing right back here. That is our fenced-in area with our chickens. So they're gonna have some additional shading in there, and the ground is just really nice. Now let's dive into how to actually get your trees in the ground and make sure that you are successful. There are really two main times that we like to plant our trees here at our homestead, and that is going to be the fall and the spring. And we have had so much success at both times of year, so it is really up to you. What I like about the fall is usually you put them in the ground, you water them a few times, but they will go dormant over the winter, and by the spring they're pretty well rooted into the ground that you don't really have to worry about them as much. Now on the opposite side, when planting in the spring, you will, like end of winter, beginning of spring, really great time to plant them in our zone. And again, you do want to look this up for your zone, but we will plant them, and it does require a little bit more TLC. You do need to make sure that you're watering them all summer long because they have not fully rooted into the ground by the time the heat of the summer comes, and some people will forget that, and not watering them accordingly is going to cause them to not be as successful. Water is really important, but making sure that you're providing them with the best soil at the beginning and the best environment at the beginning is going to be key. Now, first off, when you do dig your hole for your tree, we do want to make sure that it is about double the size of our root ball. So we're choosing an area, we're digging it nice, deep and wide. This is so that we're able to amend the soil that's around the root ball, as well as that root ball is going to have a nice soil that it's come in. I mixed a really good nutritious soil along with soil that we had in the ground and from our garden, and this created a really nice area to get our tree in, so it has a nice, beautiful, well nutritious area that it can be set in. The next thing to think about is actually mulching around your tree. This is really important. You want to make sure that you're not doing a mountain of mulch, but it's nice and flat and not covering too much of the stem of your tree here. This is really important to retaining moisture for the tree, to suppressing weeds growing around your tree, and creating a nice environment to keep it cooler in the summer, as well as nice and warm should you get snow like we did. Watering is going to be really important for your tree. You want to make sure that the roots are really able to develop and that you're providing an adequate amount of water, especially, as I said earlier, if you are planting your trees in the spring, make sure that you're watering them all summer long. If you're doing it in the fall, it's going to go dormant during the winter, so you don't have to worry as much about watering all year, but something that you do want to keep in mind if you are planting them in the spring. Now, fertilization is really important to your trees, especially apple trees need a good amount of fertilization every single year, sometimes twice a year, for them to actually provide you some fruit. So make sure that you're researching, depending on your tree, what fertilization you need to do and what you want to do given the type of fruit that you're growing and how organic or not organic you might want to be growing your orchard. We've talked about pruning before. You do want to make sure that you are pruning in the spring or winter when the tree is dormant. You're making sure that you're cutting off any diseases that could be on the tree, and you are overall making sure that you're growing the tree the way that you want. You can really control a tree by pruning, and we are going to be sharing how to prune different types of fruit trees. So if you're interested in learning more about that, definitely subscribe because we're going to be talking a lot more about that. It's also really important once your tree is in the ground to make sure that you are always doing pest and disease prevention and management. This can be putting fencing around your trees, this can be wrapping your tree trunks, or it can be regularly checking on your trees to make sure that they don't have diseases on them, and you're cutting off anything that you see as soon as possible so that it doesn't spread to other areas of your tree. Now, after a couple of months or a couple of years, depending on the tree that you have, you're going to start to reap the benefits of your tree by getting a large, abundant amount of harvest. So as long as you keep up with your trees, you provide them with a great space from the beginning, you're watering them, you're giving them a beautiful location with lots of sunlight, then you're going to have a lot of success and you're going to be able to harvest some beautiful fruit trees. Happy planting! I hope that this video was helpful. If you want to learn more about tree management, planting your own orchard, growing your own fruit, of vegetables, and more, then definitely subscribe, and we'll see you guys again next time. Bye!